So, Imzamam, this verdict just in the last few minutes, this guilty verdict for Conor Chapman, found guilty of murdering Elle Edwards. What was the reaction in court?
Well, our colleague inside court's been telling me that the family were in tears. They were incredibly happy as well when that verdict of murder came through. And Elle Edwards' father, Tim, who I spoke to in that report there, once again looking directly at Conor Chapman as those verdicts were read out to him as he stood in the dock. He told me that he looked at Conor Chapman throughout the trial to see if there was any ounce of remorse from him, any regret for what he had done, and Tim had found none. The family now outside the courtroom hugging each other, incredibly happy and emotional with these verdicts. It's important as well to note that there was a co-defendant on trial with Conor Chapman, Thomas Waring. Thomas Waring, a criminal friend of Conor Chapman, a criminal ally, someone Conor Chapman could trust, the person where Conor Chapman had taken the murder weapon to his home, the person who had assisted Conor Chapman in burning out that Mercedes A-Class, which was used on the night he murdered Elle Edwards. Thomas Waring has also been found guilty of possessing a prohibited weapon and assisting an offender, that offender, of course, being Conor Chapman. Now, the family we are expecting shortly to come out and say a few words alongside Merseyside police, who said it was CCTV that played a crucial role in this investigation. They trawled through, I think it was around 1,300 hours worth of CCTV footage, and of course it was that essentially which was played to the jury, which was incredibly overwhelming. The footage not only of the moment Conor Chapman fired 12 bullets into a crowd of people, but also seeing him ruffling his hair, dropping the murder weapon as he walked towards his friend's house, him driving that Mercedes A-Class, a car that had been in his possession for around 3 months before the attack had taken place, using false number plates throughout that whole time. He said it was a pool car that other criminals had used as well. And then, of course, there was the evidence in terms of DNA. DNA found on a red glove that Conor Chapman had used on the night of the shooting, a builder's glove, and DNA found on bullet casing as well that was found at the murder scene. So I think the jury over the last 3.5 weeks have heard a wealth of evidence, which essentially boiled down to quite overwhelming evidence to sway in the way that Conor Chapman has today been found guilty of the murder of Elle Edwards. Let's just recap. It was 10 minutes before Christmas Day. Conor Chapman had arrived at the Lighthouse Inn, which was absolutely packed, as it usually is almost every year on Christmas Eve, where people, mainly young people, the age of Elle Edwards, 26, were in that pub celebrating, enjoying what was the festive period. And Conor Chapman had arrived just before 9 o'clock that evening. He'd essentially done a recce of the area, looking around the Lighthouse Inn. And then he went and parked his stolen A-Class Mercedes in the car park of the Lighthouse Inn, and he watched on. He waited until he saw his targets, Kieran Selkeld and Jake Duffy, two members from a rival estate, a rival gang to Conor Chapman. This was an ongoing feud between these two gangs. He then saw those people, he approached the building, and he fired what police say was indiscriminately towards a crowd of people. It was just 4 minutes before that firing that Elle Edwards had gone out with her friends into the beer garden and had gone out for a cigarette. She was a wholly innocent bystander in this attack, and I think that's really what has been a common thread throughout this whole case, is that people were saying this was Christmas Eve. Elle was celebrating with friends and family like millions of people were doing up and down the country, and she, an innocent bystander, was shot in the head with 2 bullets and they were unsurvivable. 2 other targets were seriously injured, the intended targets, and then 3 other men as well had sustained injuries. And just going back to those verdicts for Conor Chapman, the 23-year-old who at all times had completely denied his role in this murder. He had pleaded guilty for one of the counts right at the beginning. That was possession of stolen goods, the A-class Mercedes. However, he had pleaded not guilty to murder, and throughout the whole trial denied that it was him who pulled the trigger which killed Elle Edwards. But today the jury found him guilty of her murder. They found him guilty of 2 counts of attempted murder. They found him guilty of 2 counts of wounding with intent. They found him guilty of assault occasioning actual bodily harm. They found him guilty of possessing a firearm with intent to endanger life, and found him guilty of possessing ammunition with intent to endanger life. It's expected that the judge will sentence Conor Chapman tomorrow at around 2 o'clock here at Liverpool Crown Court. But when we look at the reaction from the family, the sheer relief of people who for the last 6 months have just been questioning who was the person that took Elle Edwards' life on Christmas Eve. And Tim Edwards, her father, had been very emotional in court throughout the last 3.5 weeks. But today in particular, it's clearly hit a man who has been missing his daughter for the last 6 months or so. He was crying in court. He was incredibly emotional. There were shouts of yes in the public gallery. The family had gone outside the courtroom, started hugging each other as well. And we are expecting for some of the family members to come out and give us their reaction as to what happened. But we go back and look back at the details of this case. It was incredibly overwhelming evidence that was presented to this jury, and I think the police, Merseyside police who carried out this investigation, felt it was that evidence that really what it was they could put towards the jury. Here is the family, Tim Edwards there, very happy. Tim, do you want to come say a few words?
Just a very brief word just now for BBC.
Just a few words here, Tim.
We know that you want to talk tomorrow, but just your reactions now to what's happened in court today.
Well, we got the result we wanted. Justice for Elle. So it's always been about. Those 2 cowards in there decided to drag it out for 4 weeks, put all these people through that, and everyone else around it involved in the case. Can't thank the police enough for what they did, and we got there in the end, and the right results. And you know what? I hope them 2 never see another Christmas again ever in their lives.
Chapman tried to hide from you in the dock. He tried to keep his head so that he couldn't see you.
I've had my eyes on him for 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 4, however long it's been, and he has not looked at me once because he's a coward, and that's exactly what he is. And I couldn't care less about him. I'll never ever mention his name, and I hope he rots in hell.
How much of a relief is this for you, Tim? I've spoken to you for the last 6 months, ever since this happened. How much of a relief personally is this for you?
It's a big relief because now we can start again. We've been put through hell, and we deserve now to be given the life back that we had before, which will never be the same. And we can it's now a new chapter. It's a new beginning for our family. Big day indeed, yeah. It's the worst day, but the best of the worst day. That's all I'd say. Thank you, everyone.